And now, President Obama's foreign policy. Is he or is he not living up to his campaign promises in his first 100 days in office?
I will end this war in Iraq responsibly and finish the fight against al-Qaeda and the Taliban in Afghanistan. I will rebuild our military to meet future conflicts, but I will also renew the tough, direct diplomacy that can prevent Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons and curb Russian aggression. I will build new partnerships to defeat the threats of the 21st century: terrorism and nuclear proliferation, poverty and genocide, climate change and disease. And I will restore our moral standing so that America is once again that last best hope for all who are called to the cause of freedom, who long for lives of peace, and who yearn for a better future.
President Obama's advocacy for new, tough, direct diplomacy and building new partnerships to combat the threats of the 21st century. Are these promises going to rebuild America's moral standing abroad, as he predicted at the Democratic National Convention? Or is it just campaign rhetoric? Are these promises actually going to produce results, or is it just cheap talk? Let's start with Russia. President Obama sent a secret letter to Russia's president this February. The letter was part of an effort to press the reset button on Russian-American relations, as Secretary of State Hillary Clinton proposed in meetings with Russia's foreign minister, Sergei V. Lavrov. The letter also suggested that the U.S. would back off deploying a new missile defense system in Eastern Europe if Moscow would help stop Iran from developing long-range weapons. Washington urgently needs Moscow's help in achieving one of its key foreign policy priorities, containing Iran's nuclear ambitions. Its support is also critical to the U.S.'s efforts to use sanctions to pressure Iran to back down on this nuclear issue. However, Russia will only cooperate if it is satisfied that Obama has abandoned the more confrontational approach of the Bush administration towards Iran. So has Obama departed from the Bush administration's diplomatic approach of including Iran in the axis of evil and not talking to them until they promise to suspend their nuclear enrichment program? In celebration of Iran's New Year, Nowruz, President Obama made a clear departure from his predecessor in directly addressing the Iranian people in a video message. In this message, Obama offered, quote, the promise of a new beginning.
My administration is now committed to diplomacy that addresses the full range of issues before us and to pursuing constructive ties among the United States, Iran, and the international community. This process will not be advanced by threats. We seek instead engagement that is honest and grounded in mutual respect. You too have a choice. The United States wants the Islamic Republic of Iran to take its rightful place in the community of nations. You have that right, but it comes with real responsibilities. And that place cannot be reached through terror or arms, but rather through peaceful actions that demonstrate the true greatness of the Iranian people and civilization.
Iran's response was immediate and typically cautious. Its clerical leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, urged Obama to change not just his tone, but also his behavior. He promised a policy based on reason, not emotion. Mr. Obama would be judged by his actions. However, in recent weeks, Iran has seemed to indicate more openness and less skepticism towards Obama's offer. Recently, Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad has sent the clearest signal yet that the Islamic Republic wants to renegotiate and have warmer ties with the U.S., only one day after Washington expressed its willingness to renegotiate its stance towards its nuclear enrichment program. Taken together, these developments seem to indicate that the two former adversaries are seeking ways to return to the negotiating table and ease a nearly 30-year diplomatic standoff. Moving forward to Latin America, President Obama last week eased restrictions on Cuban Americans' ability to visit and send money to their family in Cuba, the first significant change in U.S. policy towards Cuba in decades. This policy indicates a marked shift from the Bush administration's particularly hardline policy towards Cuba, and Obama's policy seems to have the full backing of the American public. Also, in a new approach to diplomacy, Obama recently held, for the first time in White House history, a full Spanish-language White House press briefing for the Spanish-language media.
Medidas, ciertos pasos para extender la mano al pueblo cubano, para apoyar su deseo de vivir con respeto a los derechos humanos y para poder determinar su destino propio.
At the Summit of the Americas this month, President Obama took the opportunity to reach out to Hugo Chavez, president of Venezuela and a former enemy to the Bush administration. The image of the two shaking hands and smiling has dominated headlines around the world and sent a clear signal to the world abroad that there are significant changes going on in U.S. policy. However, domestically, Obama has received much criticism for this handshake, particularly from former Vice President Dick Cheney and former Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich.
Well, look, the president recently bowed to the Saudi king. He has been friendly to the Iranians despite their 7,300 centrifuges making a nuclear weapon. He basically backed off on his threats to the North Koreans. He has made life easier for the Castro dictatorship in Cuba. Why not embrace or at least be cheerful and friendly with Hugo Chavez? I think it sends a terrible signal to all of Latin America and a terrible signal about how the new administration regards dictators. But this is an administration which doesn't want us to drill offshore, doesn't want us to find new oil and gas, so we become even more dependent on the Saudis and the Venezuelans. So apparently being nice to the dictators is the way he intends to get oil. I think we'd be a lot better off drilling offshore in the United States and getting American energy rather than being nice to dictators.
This sharp criticism from home seems to indicate that Obama's diplomacy is not admired or loved by everyone. Obama's policies, he has insisted, are simply a reaction to George Bush, and rather not an indication of weakness. Obama has maintained that his new approach to foreign policy is simply indicating a willingness to engage with foreign nations.
So history reminds us that walls can be torn down, but the task is never easy. True partnership and true progress requires constant work and sustained sacrifice. They require sharing the burdens of development and diplomacy, of peace and progress. They require allies who will listen to each other, learn from each other, and most of all, trust each other. That is why America cannot turn inward. That is why Europe cannot turn inward. America has no better partner than Europe. Now is the time to build new bridges across the globe as strong as the one that binds us across the Atlantic. Now is the time to join together through constant cooperation and strong institutions and shared sacrifice and a global commitment to progress to meet the challenges of the 21st century. It was this spirit that led airlift planes to appear in the sky above our heads and people to assemble where we stand today. And this is the moment when our nations and all nations must summon that spirit anew.